Borderlands 4 came out. Well, now's as good a time as any to go check out the series again. I kind of fell off after the pre-sequel for some reason, so let's see what's up with the new one. I used to play these games so much when I was younger, and I can't run Borderlands 4. Okay, well, I guess we're doing Borderlands 2 instead.
Deadly shot from nowhere. Nice!
So the Borderlands franchise is very strange. Goofy characters, strange weapons, and villains that you just love to hate.
Oh, you know what? I am so sorry. I just, forgive me. Where's your husband now?
He's dead.
That is a heartbreaker. But you got something in common with him now, at least!
And while the original Vault Hunters from the first Borderlands game are probably the most memorable ones, considering they have the most screen time, especially Mordecai and Brick, but the game itself just isn't my favorite, mostly for how the story is done and nothing to do with the actual gameplay itself. But the Vault Hunters in the second game are just as fun, even if they don't have as much story stuff to them. Also, I played Borderlands 2 just a bunch more than the first game, so I'm gonna go with that one. And these Vault Hunters are Axton, the commando that can throw out dull turrets to fight, Maya, this game's siren that can lock down her enemies with phase lock, Zero, my personal favorite, an assassin with a hollow clone that can go invisible, and Salvador, the gun zerker who can dual wield guns. You know, in these kind of games, I tend to focus on the character abilities and not so much the gunplay, because anyone can use any gun, some are just better with different guns than other ones. So as much as it hurts to turn away one of my own, I think I'm gonna have to leave Salvador on the side here, and maybe he'll end up on the Patreon file. Also, before we hop into these builds, we recently opened up our channel membership. You can get cool icons and emotes made by our very own mouse, and it helps support the channel in these very rough times here on YouTube. Of course, you can also support the channel just by liking and commenting, sharing our videos around, and if you want the character files that have a level-by-level breakdown, you can get those on Patreon for just $1. Speaking of Patreon, thank you to Ravelord for commissioning this team. You can also commission your own team for $20, also on Patreon. Now let's get into the builds. So when it comes to Borderlands characters, there is one thing that all of them share that's going to make all these builds kind of up in the air, because all of these characters have 3 distinct build paths they can go on, and these usually end up being A, doing better with their preferred weapon, B, a heavy focus on elemental damage, and C, making their class ability stronger. Now this is by no means a hard rule, as not all the classes work like this, and some of the paths tend to blur the lines sometimes either way. But what it does mean is if you wanted, you could make a completely different build that still hits the same kind of benchmark and get a perfectly viable character that fits Axton, Zero, Maya, or whoever else you want in Borderlands. But at least for my build, I did my best to focus on their unique abilities. Anyone can use any weapon, and anyone can focus on whatever particular element you want to shoot someone in the face with.
Knock knock! Who's there? Shoot me in the face! Thank you!
So with that out of the way, Axton the Soldier Boy. An ex-Dahl soldier that after trying to go for glory got discharged and was on death row. So instead he went AWOL and ran off to Pandora outside of Dahl's control to become a Vault Hunter. But it wasn't just that Axton ran away when he was supposed to be executed, he also took some Dahl tech with him, his saber turrets, or turret. A deployable machine gun with detachable rockets and shield pack, and if push does come to shove, he can strap a mini nuke to it that somehow does not destroy the saber turret. And on top of this, he still has his skills from being a soldier, so he's good with assault rifles, grenades, and explosives, and has some good survivability. But that is kind of it. Sure, there's the actual fights in-game, like the bunker, the warrior, and obviously the entire plot of Borderlands 2, but outside of one big thing I'll talk about later, there aren't really a lot of direct things to compare for each character. Sure, some of the characters are more durable than others, but at the end of the day, they'll get one shot in a cutscene anyway. Rip rollin'. And for the most part, any of the characters can do any of the things shown in the game. It's also now that I'm thinking I maybe should have done the original Vault Hunters, but oh well, we're already far beyond that. The point is, the format and or length of this video might be a little bit different than usual. Now let's get back to our gunner boy. So like I said, Axton is an ex-soldier turned Vault Hunter, and as far as we can tell he is human, so I'm going to be using human here. Now if you want, you can use the basic soldier background because, well, he was a soldier, but because Axton went AWOL and left it life behind, I'm going to turn that into a background and use that instead. And those are going to give him alert and tough for his feats. As for Axton's stats though, it's kinda hard to pick. Sure, he's got some nice muscle definition, but again, we never really see any good feats of strength other than carrying 10 plus weapons on him, which everyone else can do. So instead, his main stat is going to be intelligence, followed by con, dex, then strength, charisma, and finally he's dumping wisdom. Which might seem weird, but with as little info as we have here, I'm prioritizing the stats that are going to help him the most when it comes to the class that I'm picking for him. And speaking of this class, there's really only one thing that fits for summoning turrets, the Artillerist Artificer. This will also not only let his turrets hit harder and more reliably, but it will also work for getting him some cantrips that can function as elemental weapons. But again, the most important thing here is that the Artillerist gets Axton his Saber turrets, which are probably going to stay on the Force Ballist option, dealing 2d8 force damage, but there is a Flamethrower option or even a Shield option as well. This subclass also comes with some pretty on-point spells for Axton. Thunderwave and Shatter are great for a shotgun, Scorching Ray is really good for any dull assault rifles because when you zoom in, they shoot in 3-round burst, and Fireball just for a rocket launcher or a grenade. And I know I said I was mostly going to ignore the gun stuff, but when his subclass literally hands Axton an entire arsenal of guns, I can't really do that. And that only continues as Axton takes more levels in the Artillerist Artificer, because Arcane Firearm is just a gun that deals an extra 1d8 damage on any of the spells I mentioned before, which works especially well with Scorching Ray. He also gets Explosive Cannon, letting his saber turrets explode when they die, but more importantly giving them an extra 1d8 damage on their attacks. He's also going to get a bunch of infusions that are going to make his magic guns even better, like Enhanced Arcane Focus because all of his guns are spells, but he can also get a much worse turret, or I guess if you really want, it could just be like a claptrap that follows him around by taking the Homunculus Servant Infusion. It can attack, just don't expect it to do a whole lot. He's also going to take a Bag of Holding, some night vision goggles with the Goggles of Night, and because Axton is an Artificer and some of his skills do increase his maximum HP, he is going to grab an Amulet of Health to make up for that. But those are just the basic features of the Artillerist Artificer. Axton still has his feats and ASIs, most of which are going to go into ASIs, but one of them is going to go into the Warcaster feat, which will max out his intelligence for the most damage he can get on his turrets and his guns. He's also going to be able to grab one of the abilities from the survival tree that lets him have 2 turrets out at once, doubling the amount of ammo being thrown down range at the enemies. And lastly, Enhanced Arcane Focus goes up to a +2 for his gun spells, and if someone does get a little up close and personal with his turrets, they can just blow up and hopefully take the enemy with them. Oh, and the same feature that gives Axton 2 turrets, fortified position, also gives any of his allies nearby it cover, which is great for the Phalanx Shield ability from the same survival tree, so it's a great fit. And really, that's kind of it for Axton. He's one of the most basic characters here, but spoiler warning, none of the characters I'm covering in this episode are all that complex. I probably should have done the original Vault Hunters, but, you know, hindsight's 2020. But for now, let's move on to our next character, one of the inspirations for my own design here, Zero. So, Zero. Again, one of the characters that I took inspiration from for my own design, and the character I played the most of in Borderlands 2. An assassin, after finishing his last job, was so dissatisfied with the kill that he went off to hunt legendary vaults on Pandora in hopes of a real challenge. And after surviving a surprise train crash from Handsome Jack, who I will never forgive for what he did to Bloodwing, Zero, along with the other Vault Hunters, go on a tear through Pandora, taking on bandits, skags, Hyperion robots, and a giant Iridium monster called the Guardian, before finally avenging Bloodwing. And everyone else, I guess, too. And Zero does his part both with his skills in sniping and swordplay, but also with his hologram decoy that he can throw out and become invisible for some extra damage on his next attack. And despite just being a hologram, it is pretty versatile. Zero gets increased damage, the hologram can explode, sensing a bit of a theme here. And if Zero times it right, he can chain holograms back to back. And some of this is a little bit out of my reach, but I'll do my best to get what I can. Anyways, we're gonna move a little fast for this part. Zero is probably a human, and being a hitman, that's the background I gave him for the Savage Attacker feat. But for his human feat, he is going to get his first hologram, so he can put the little emojis over his face with Minor Illusion and Silent Image for his first clone from the Magic Initiate feat. His stats are also pretty simple, a big focus on Dex and Wisdom, then Con and Intelligence, followed by Charisma for his poetry, and lastly he dumps Strength because he's got some real noodle arms going on. Now depending on if you go down the sniper path or not, Zero is either really good at long range, or with the other two paths he is just as effective in melee. Personally, I prefer the melee path, so that's what I'm going to go with here. But for a more snipey, long range Zero, I'd probably do a mix of Ranger and Fighter. But for now we're going to focus on his melee combat and getting his clone. And there are a few different options depending on how you want to do this. Hell, if you wanted, you could make Zero into a Bladesong Wizard with a focus on a bunch of illusion and buffing spells, but for my version, Zero is going to start off as an Echo Knight fighter, getting an honestly pretty advanced clone with Manifest Echo, which isn't 100% how his clone works, but As far as I can tell, I can't really make an illusion that also explodes, so having it punch the nearest enemy in the face is the best I can do for that. But Zero's really only here for that feature, since it's only half of his deception ability. He still needs to be able to turn invisible and get extra damage when he comes out of it. Now again, while the Bladesong Wizard would be a great alternative here, I'm actually going to have Zero become a rogue going off his assassin background. And only one rogue outside of the Arcane Trickster, which he is very much not, gets to go invisible at will. That being the Soul Knife rogue, which is also quickly becoming one of my most used rogue subclasses on this channel. But the main thing we're looking for here for Zero is the sneak attack from the base rogue, which will cover the extra damage coming out of Deception. Psychic Blades also cover the ability for him to throw knives out while he's invisible, Uncanny Dodge to stay alive a little longer, and Cunning Strike to mess with his targets to make sure they can't escape. And really, again, this build is simple. Zero gets a couple feats, mainly Slasher, but also Shadow Touch for the invisibility spell, and he maxes out his dex with a +2 ASI before getting his last feature, Psychic Veil. Not only does this get him another way to become invisible, but it also stacks him with 7d6 sneak attack die, so that when Zero does eventually come out of invisibility to hit you in the back, it is going to hit extra hard. So for his first attack, combined with sneak attack plus the bonus action attack from Soul Knife, then extra attack from his Echo, and then 2 more attacks from Action Surge, Zero can smack you for 12d6 plus 25, assuming that his weapon is a short sword so that he can actually use sneak attack die, which is around 73 damage in a round, which for a bursty style character isn't terrible but also isn't amazing. But on that note, Zero is only level 16. Taking 2 more levels in Fighter for extra attack and then 2 more levels in Rogue for some more sneak attack would increase the damage quite a bit. I just feel like with the lack of solid feats, it was hard for me to make him much higher than this. But I still think everything fits really well. He even gets the execute ability for teleporting to his enemies with Soul Blade. So while Zero might only communicate in poetry, that might end up being the last thing you hear as his hologram fades and you suddenly have a new hole in your chest that you swear wasn't there a second ago.
Oh god, she's armed with a Molly 1 SMG. She's a Vault Hunter. She's a Siren Warrior who could kill me with her brain.
Okay, so Maya is definitely one of the characters I had the most fun with here. I didn't really play her all that much in-game, but one of my friends did, and she is a huge help with her phase lock ability that stops enemies in place and just lets the entire team turn them into Swiss cheese. Now Maya is this game's Siren, and Sirens are weird and have weird powers. There can only ever be 6 Sirens in the universe at one time, and when one dies, their powers are transferred to a random woman in the universe. But it's not exactly that simple, because the new Siren is not going to have the same powers as the previous one unless those powers were directly transferred. The Siren powers also have a huge range. Lilith can phase walk, entering another plane of reality where she moves faster, can be hit, and hits harder coming out of it. Maya can imprison enemies in a separate reality with her phase lock, and the Siren from the third game gets a bunch of extra arms for clobbering people with. Now Maya, like the others, is not from Pandora, and on her home planet she was actually worshipped as a kind of goddess thanks to her siren powers, which I honestly can't blame them for. But when Maya learned that she was being used to control the people of her planet as a figurehead, she bailed on them and got a one-way ticket to Pandora to learn more about sirens, and by extension, herself. Now while all the sirens we've seen so far are humans, as far as I'm aware, that doesn't mean that they stay human once they become sirens. They have special powers, and in a few cases they even get wings. So instead of human, I think Maya is going to be an Aasimar with Inner Radiance, since I don't think she ever shows wings like Lilith or Angel do. And being an Aasimar, Maya gets resistant to both radiant and necrotic damage, and gets some healing, which she does have in-game. As for her background, being raised as a not-quite goddess on top of the healing she gets from her species means I'm going to give her the false idol background with the healer feat. And speaking of her in-game abilities, like I said before, Maya has the ability Phase Lock, letting her capture and hold her enemies in a sort of pocket dimension that lets her allies still hurt them, but keeps them from moving or fighting back. And in some cases, the enemies come out brainwashed and will fight on Maya's side for a while. And again, we're going to be ignoring the gun stuff here because Maya is mostly a spellcaster who in this case was born with the powers, or at least got them super early in her life. That is not usually the case for most sirens. Most of them become sirens as another one dies. So it's more like she was blessed with these powers rather than them being part of her bloodline. And leaning into the idea that she was blessed with these powers on top of her being the figurehead for a sort of church on her home planet, I think Maya is going to be a cleric, which does go really well with her high wisdom score, meaning that her stats are going to look a little bit like this. She has tied her wisdom and dexterity because she's pretty nimble and certainly is not a strength character, followed by charisma and constitution, then intelligence, and she dumps strength because she shares her noodle arms with Zero. Now, going with the cleric does give us a bunch of options, and a ton of them are fun, like the Domain of Forge, Twilight, and Grave are some of my favorites. But I think for Maya, we need one that can cover a lot of her phase lock stuff, not only with the class abilities, but also with domain spells, which does narrow things down a lot, leaving us only with the Domain of Order. Not only does this domain come with spells like Hold Person, Slow, Compulsion, and Dominate Person, it also lets her allies get extra hits in, and her Channel of Divinity, Order's Demand, lets Maya charm any and all creatures within 30 feet of her for 1 round. And that's only level 3. At level 6, she can speed up the casting of any enchantment spells from an action to a bonus action, so she can Hold Person someone and then instantly smack them with Blessed Weapon for a free crit, or do any other combination of spells. But the big ticket item for Maya here is going to be the last feature all the way at level 17, Order's Wrath. Meaning that every time Maya smacks someone with her Blessed Strikes, they take extra damage from the next thing to hit them. So if Maya already has Spiritual Weapon up and then swings at someone that is paralyzed from Hold Person, that is an auto crit on the next thing to hit them with an extra 2d8 damage on top, which also factor into the crit. So long story short, they're not going to be having all that good of a time. And being level 17 means that Maya can pair this and other abilities with higher level spells like Harm for pure damage, Flame Strike or Firestorm for elemental stuff, or just hit things with her Phase Lock a lot harder. She can also take a page out of Lilith's book and grab Etherealness for a bit of a safety net. And speaking of Lilith, she is the reason that Maya is level 17, giving her 9th level spells. Because Lilith performs the only feat I can think of in the series that allows me to scale Maya to her. That being using her Phase Walk ability while hopped up on Iridium to warp an entire city out of where it is into a safe location. We have not seen Maya do anything like this, but if one Siren with a lot of experience can do it, presumably so can another if, again, she is hopped up on Iridium. So I didn't make it level 20, I made it level 17, gives her a little bit more room to grow or use that Iridium to boost herself up. But at the end of the day, Maya might not be dealing the most damage, but that's also not what she's here for. Maya is here to put the enemies in a bubble so that they have to sit there helplessly while the entire team fills them with so many holes that it will trigger someone's tryptophobia. Okay, so I mentioned before that I wasn't going to make Salvador, and that is true, but I did make one more character that is going to be Patreon exclusive, because, well, honestly his build is super simple, and I just kind of made him for fun. That being Krieg, the psycho buzz-axe-wielding barbarian that is as crazy as he is in love with Maya.
I'm the conductor of the poop train!
And I'm not making a section on him in this video because he's kinda just your stereotypical barbarian. He's super tanky, wants to take a lot of damage, and hits things in the face really hard.
Turn around, pretty lady!
So you can find his build and Salvador's on Patreon. Anyways, I want to again thank Ravelor for commissioning this team. If you want to do that yourself, you can do that on Patreon for $20, and you can join the membership for, I think, $3 for some cool emotes and other stuff if you want to support us that way. But that is going to do it for today. I will see you all next time, and as always, have a wonderful day.